Welcome back to the 1,000 Card Project podcast, where we take you behind the scenes with the collectors, flippers, and entrepreneurs who are turning cardboard into opportunity. Today's guest is someone who's been quietly building one of the most informative and authentic voices in the hobby, especially if you're a football fan, a Bowman University addict, or someone grinded it out on ComC and eBay. Gabe Encinas, better known as Gabe Card Stacks on YouTube, has been documenting his journey with full transparency, breaking down sourcing strategies, sales flips, and ups and downs of running cards as a real business. In this episode, we dig into how he's built his stack from scratch, the plays that worked and didn't, and the systems behind his success. Whether you're brand new or scaling fast, this episode is packed with insight. So let's dive into it. All right, guys, as mentioned in the intro, I'm joined by the one and only Gabe Card Stacks, as you guys more affectionately know him. But, man, appreciate you coming on the show, brother.
Yeah, for sure. No, appreciate you having me. Excited to chat.
As I mentioned, you're one of the first guys that when I was kind of getting back into things that I really just identified with. I thought just the way that you kind of approached it. Obviously, you're a big college football fan, so that was a part of it as well. But I mean, just take us kind of back to, I don't want the Reader's Digest version, of kind of the collecting journey, but really kind of hone in on the point when you decided to kind of make this more of a business, really.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, yeah, I jumped back in during COVID at the peak of kind of the interest there. And I just, I was kind of all over the place. Didn't really love collecting like the modern pro NFL stuff, but still, was just dabbling, I guess. And then once the release and all the NIL discussions came out with like Bowman University, that really, I feel like I found my calling there and my niche where I was like, hey, I love college football. That's really all I watch. And I feel like, and it was good timing back then where I think it dropped just before the draft. So I was like, wow, a lot of these guys are getting all of this attention very quickly. And I don't think people are realizing that. And every NFL fan is watching the draft. They want to see who their team just added and what the future of their team would look like. So they're always consuming that content. So I just thought that was a real opportunity for me to kind of start diving into that and even more with the next checklist. So it was just really a perfect timing deal with the draft and me realizing that all these guys are going to, or not all of them, but most of them are going to have an opportunity there. And then it rolled into the next set. And once that second set, the 2022 with like Bo Nix and a lot of those guys came out, that's when I was like, I think there's some big opportunity to really prospect here, and just slowly started gaining some traction. The popularity, the stigma of college cards kind of started to go away and started becoming increasingly popular. And that's when I just decided around the 2023 release, I was like, I think this is just my area that I'm going to grow in. It's what I love, I'm passionate about. And now a couple years later, it's definitely grown into something I never really would have thought it would.
It's been awesome. I think it's so counterintuitive too. I think when you really kind of dig into I don't know if you want to call them the old school hobby or whatever you want to say, but I think, most people will tell you stay away from college cards because, the pro card is the only one that matters, and, there's a great book, it's called Blue Ocean, where basically, the premise of the book is that when they go shark fishing, they circle up and they throw chum in the water and all the boats and all the sharks come to one little area. And the whole premise is basically like, why are you fighting over this little bit of chum, and getting picked off by these fishermen when you're a shark? Just go out there and be a shark, and eat whatever you want to eat, and I think you've done that in this space by going and niching down in obviously college football, but you do more than that, obviously, but talk a little bit about kind of some of that's one decision. Like, what are some of the key decisions and key steps that you've made in this kind of business journey, I guess, to really kind of grow KB Card Stacks into what it is today?
Yeah, so I think it really kind of started with YouTube. I think that also opened my eyes to kind of the business standpoint. Used to just, a lot of my friends would just post their card show pickups, and it's like, hey, that's my favorite part, is seeing like, what are people buying and why are they buying it? At what price points, and what's their plan with it. So we would just upload our card show pickups, and I would just do it. I'd get 30 views or something, nothing crazy. And just one day I had a huge eBay sale weekend, maybe like 300 for me, which was a lot. And I was like, I'm going to record this. And, I think my title was like how much money I made selling sports cards this weekend. And that video took off thousands of views. I had a couple hundred subscribers in the first few days. And from there I was like, whoa, I got to like take advantage of this momentum. I'm in the algorithm and things are hopefully going to start trending that way. So YouTube and really the evolution of that, before it was just straight up mail day. All right, this is what I'm picking up. I'd mix in some card shows. This is what's selling. Never went on camera. It was just strictly, just everything that's in front of me. And then I honestly, that was, let's say 2022, not until like the last year and a half, 2 years maybe, then I started getting on camera, then kind of fell back into routine, and I was like, yeah, it's just way easier, way less editing time. I just got too comfortable. And then really at the beginning of this year, you were like, hey, like, why don't you get back on camera? And that really motivated me to switch things up a little bit. So got into that, and then now I feel like, I don't know what switched, but you're like, what, who cares? I'm just going to do what I want to do on camera. This is me in front of it. I've really started leaning into that over the last few months, I would say. So I think that's been a big piece of it, just growing that. And from there, it's just, the brand grows. You meet more people like yourself, and it just starts to grow and become a life of its own. So that, along with just the cards and the prospecting and the homework, has certainly helped in leaning into all of the different media as well.
Yeah, obviously I reached out, and it's kind of funny because obviously the people that I've had on the show thus far, I've reached out similarly to you, where it's just kind of this random dude just reaching out talking about cardboard. But it's kind of what makes the hobby great, right? It's kind of what makes it fun and like-minded people, and it's really talking sports and just having business and all those types of things, which I think is really cool. You've obviously leaned in really hard this last year. I think I've noticed it from afar at how it's taken off and continues to grow. And you mentioned kind of $200 weekends were quite a bit early on, but now that's probably routine, if not more than that. Go back a little bit, like as I'm building this 1,000 card project, and just starting it with the basics. And what do you think were the steps? Because I think everybody kind of maybe starts in the dollar box, and then they get comfortable with that, and then they maybe go to like the $5, $10 cards or whatever. Like, what do you see as the kind of natural evolution of kind of creating something that, this isn't your full-time job, but it could possibly be at some point. Like, what are the steps to kind of go from that to potentially a full-time business?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think, like you said, we all kind of start in the dollar box. I remember like my card show budgets were, maybe 120, and that was like my full bankroll. I'm like, man, that's all I've got. And now, you go to the card show and it's, for me now, 300 to 400 minimum, where I'm like, all right, like, I could spend all this, and there's still plenty in the bankroll, of course. So, I think just dollar boxing and just constantly finding deals, you're grinding out a lot of the lower end stuff, but it's really just the constant, buying 20 cards for, $25 and selling those at $2-3 a piece, and, going into the next card show with $50, and now you're buying, 15 $5 cards, and constantly trying to flip that until, you eventually just get to a point where it's kind of self-sustaining a little bit, where you're like, you kind of got the constant inflow, outflow. So just being aware of that. And then honestly, I would say, just in terms of kind of a YouTube or video standpoint and growing, I would just say to continue posting and just be yourself. I think that's also the big thing. And I think if you're willing to grind out videos and try new things, get out of your comfort zone, I think that's really the big part. So just grind. I feel like I'm a big Gary V guy, and he was always one of the like, hey, like, post a video, like, who cares? And so for me, I always, now the way that I'm looking at it is, whatever card activity I'm doing, I'm just going to record it. I'm already doing the card activity. I might as well, turn the camera on and try to upload it. So that's what I've been doing recently with shorts. But I guess to get back to it, grinding out that dollar box, building that bankroll from $10 to $100, and then just consistently just turning that inventory out, listing as many cards as you can, to try to get your margins up. So from there, I think, taking advantage of the growth, I think that's part of, maybe a reason to my success is because I feel like people who were at the beginning like saw me with this small budget and they're kind of like, it's very relatable. I think that also helps where, they're seeing like, whoa, like he was buying, Bowman pinks and selling those on draft night 2 years ago. And now he's got, gold Garrett Nussmeier autos. Like I'm truly documenting the process and the journey of it all. And I think people like to, see that. So with that, and I've been fortunate, of course, over the last few months, I feel like, as I mentioned, like I took the content a lot more seriously, and and you've been a big help as well. I remember talking about Pulse Trading, the card company, and you were like, hey, like just reach out to them, and all I did later that day, I tweeted a picture of a card, and like, hey, this Jonah Coleman, like he's in this new set on Card Auto. They reached out and like, hey, we'd love for you to try out a box, and just had Leaf, come through, and they sent a couple packages. ComC started to reach out. That's a big part of my business now, which I'm sure we'll discuss. But they reached out and they're like, hey, we want this, sort of partnership for features of our site and how to use it and all of that, and that's been going really well with that, and getting connected with Card Collector 2 as well was huge. Flew out to Shipshawana, which was an awesome show. It's just the constant grind. It's every single day for sure, but I think myself, I'm just proof. I started with $75 in a card show, and we're taking this thing to bigger and better things every month.
You said a couple things in there that I really want to hone in on. I think, I agree 1,000%. I mean, you have a unique gift of just coming across very authentic and relatable. I think that's what identifies. I think that's what identifies with me. I think that's what identifies with others. You've said this in your videos, and I always laugh when you say it, but it's so true. Like you're trying this for science. Like I'm just going to try this for science. And I think kind of pushing yourself outside of that comfort zone with every step, like I know that's for me. I think with my strategy, I think like the dollar box, I think there's high margins there that you can potentially get, but like you're never really going to make a whole lot of money from that. But I think it needs to be a part of your portfolio, right? But what I got to do better job of is that's where I'm comfortable. I got to get out of my comfort zone and get and stretch myself every so often. And I think what you do such a great job of is you do that regularly. That's just part of your DNA, but you also document it and kind of bring everybody along on the process with you. And then you sum it up. You're a great teacher, and you're able to sum it up in a pretty concise way that makes it relatable for everybody. So I think it's awesome. I think you mentioned ComC and some other strategies. I know you just made a video about DC Sports not too long ago, and you've been grading through GameStop recently. Like, if you were going to summarize your current strategy, because I know that you've gotten out of a lot of the cheaper stuff and things like what's the current strategy as a whole?
Yeah, so it's always evolving, and I feel like it definitely did evolve quite a bit this year. Part of it probably due to just kind of the work that I'm doing with ComC, but right now I would say my intentions are kind of $10 and under. I'm still like you said, you got to keep it as part of your portfolio. I'm still, when I'm at the card show, like the dollar box to me is like therapy. I'm just like, all right, like I don't have to buy anything, but I'll still flick through this and maybe put something together. But all those cards that I buy, I'm really just outsourcing to ComC now, where it's like, hey, this is kind of lower end stuff. Storage is a big thing for me. I'd like to keep all my inventory in just a small space. So just paying ComC to almost be an employee for me. For 50 cents, they will take a photo of the card, list it. I just have to price it. Once it sells, they'll handle everything on that end. So almost using them as an employee is what I say for anything kind of $10 and under. And that's just a variety of things. I've even branched out into baseball recently, where I've been, just anything that I'm like, hey, this seems to have value. Before I was just strictly football, stay in my lane. Sometimes when I get out of my lane, I do get in trouble and take some losses, but you also just learn a lesson at that point where it's like, hey, I know that this insert doesn't really sell. I thought, I hadn't seen it a ton, but now I know that it's probably one to stay away from. So just always the learning part of it as well. So anything 10 under, going to ComC. And then personally, I stay in that lane for Bowman University and Leaf and all those college products, and I'm mostly sticking with autographs. Just over the years as I've evolved, I just feel like ink is the most desirable, and there's bigger opportunity on the gain. You can see an auto go from $10 preseason to $80 before the seasons. Just a lot higher of volatility, I guess. A little bit safer floor though. When it comes to auto prices, just constantly just buying those, doing research and finding, guys who I seem undervalued where I'm like, hey, Carnell Tate is up here at $40, but I like Makai Lemon just as much, if not more, and he's at 20. And it's like kind of the arbitrage of like, hey, where's the market, and how do I figure out, how to find that balance? That's really where I'm at, and now with college football season coming up, peak preseason prices are going to be coming in. I'm going to be sending a ton of stuff to DC Sports 87. I just feel like they get a pretty strong market, and I don't have to deal with any of the shipping myself. The fees are pretty minimal, and I was pretty satisfied with my results, where I feel confident it can go out there, and I'll just wait for the money to be available for payout, and then I'm kind of done with that peak preseason hype. So that is definitely gonna be in the near future as we approach week 1. And then the thing that you also mentioned, which I need to get better about, and of course it takes a lot of upfront capital, is the grading aspect. And that takes a lot of, for science, for learning. You're gonna burn a lot of $20 bills, I'm sure. Just oh, do I send this? My thing is like, I only send cards on like, what, this feels really good. I know it'll 10, and I need to start getting into those, I think this would 9, but it's got a shot at a 10. Let's just send it and, see what happens. So that I think is kind of the next step of my evolution, is really honing in on grading and getting that kind of multiplier, I guess, on those gems when you start to take things seriously there. But it is a big upfront capital that, a year ago I didn't really have that capital to spend 200, let it sit for 45, 65 business days, and hope that they gem. So that's kind of the current state right now with how I'm using different outlets to kind of build this business.
I think what's really cool that just watching it from afar is like, you kind of learn an aspect, whether it's a distribution channel or it's a sourcing channel or something along those lines, and then you kind of create a system and almost like a set of rules for yourself. I know, like, for example, you're doing, I think, 5 cards a month or 5 cards a week or something with GameStop. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm trying to get at least a grading batch every month, and usually it's, I would say, at least 4 or 5 cards.
Yeah, so you're kind of putting these little systems in place, and again, as you kind of hone in on a system, then that allows you, kind of frees you up the mental capital to kind of look at something else and try something different. But you've got some income coming from these different choices that you've made, or strategies that you've tried. I thought there was a couple things you said there, just some terms that I thought was really cool, like arbitrage, dollar cost averaging, opportunity cost, or some of the things you kind of said in various different ways, or time horizon as well. Like, kind of run through that really quick from just an arbitrage standpoint, like where like that's what you're seeking out opportunities where maybe people don't, or it's undervalued. Talk a little bit about those 4 things, and kind of like time horizon, like how quickly you're trying to get rid of cards. Are you okay sitting for a while, or I know that you just mentioned in the DC sports video that your opportunity cost. You just wanted to get out of something so that you could put that money and put it towards something else. Like, talk a little bit about those 4 things.
Yeah, for sure. So the timing and how my turnover of inventory is something that I need to get better at, and that's why I've been wanting to downsize. I've sent probably 2,000 cards to ComC and have freed up. I had probably over 1,500 listings, not long ago, and now I'm down to like 400 on eBay. Just trying to get rid of that so I can manage it a lot better, where I can be like, hey, you know what? I see that Drew Aller Bowman Best Autos have gone up to $50, and I'm into these for 20. Like, I'm fine. I should actively try to sell these, on Discord or eBay or another platform to be able to, get that money, move it, and put it into something else. Similar to DC, I just had some of the stuff wasn't even listed on eBay that I didn't even know. And it's just stuff that, just big names. I'm like, hey, I think I'll fetch a pretty decent amount that I'm comfortable with right now, and I might as well just trigger that transaction to get that money back in. Some stuff I'm like, hey, this would kind of sit, instead of waiting, to sell my my Costco guy auto at $80 and try to make a profit on it, I'll just send it to to DC, and I'll get my $50 now and just be done with it, move on, put it into something else, something better. That's always, when I do some of those purges, I do love just getting out of something and putting into something else, just turning $22 cards that have been sitting in your pile for a long time. Let me get out of those for $25 and put that into a DJ Lagway Sapphire PSA 9 or whatever, and just something that is better to move, and I can move it faster and probably make more money in the long run or in the short term as well. So that's always a big component. And then in terms of arbitrage, yeah, for me it's just, I don't know, I look at the market all the time, and I'm just seeing where some of these prices are, and like I said with kind of Mekhi Lemon, I'm like, I think he's a way better receiver than like all of these other players that I'm seeing. I'm looking at mock draft boards. College fantasy football was a new avenue that I learned last year. Those kind of rankings should be coming out, and I do find it as a good resource to be like, hey, like last year was Denzel Boston, who I'm like, I was not really familiar with this guy, but he was going in like the second or third round, and I'm like, dang, that's a player to look out for. So that has been a good resource where you're just always learning and seeing new players, and you're like, hey, I really just feel a lot stronger about this player. And then I just start kind of hoarding up the base autos and, piecing a small little pile together. Going back to kind of the inventory turnover, it just kind of depends. And again, I need to get better about turning that stuff over. Like a Garrett Nussmeier for me, I'm like, you know what, with that week 1 versus Clemson, I like Clemson a little bit more in that one. So I'm going to try to sell before that game. After that first loss in college football, prices start to, the Georgia-Alabama game, they were selling Carson Beck halfway through the game, and I'm like, man, it's not even over right now. So it's just always kind of finding those things where I feel stronger about a player. There's a lot of just film study, I guess, and then also just information, looking at PFF grades, what's the media saying, and it's like, hey, this guy's in top 100 list, top 10 in his position right now, and his market isn't where I think it should be. So kind of just trying to find those market inefficiencies ultimately on guys that I'm like, what, that's a good player. I think it's a matter of time. Also looking at right now, I'm looking at schedules where it's like, all right, who's going to start out hot? And it's like, I like where Nebraska and Pitt are sitting right now on their schedule. Where I'm like, hey, if they can make a little 5-0 run, get in the top 25, like, I think there's definitely room right now, even as we kind of approach peak preseason. So there's just so many different avenues that I'm always looking at to try to figure out, what's the best approach.
Well, yeah, Carson Beck almost came back and beat us this year, so that was scary there. Denzel Boston, I coached in college as well, and that kid, we had Roma Dunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, and then you got Jeremy Bernard, that's going to get a lot of hype this year as well. And Denzel wasn't scared of any of them. He would work just as hard. That's a good pick right there. But yeah, man, I think what great insight. I think one thing I took out of that, because it's a stage that I'm in. I originally, when I kind of jumped back in, and I've never not collected in some type of way, but I've never really looked at it as like a business or like a strategy to make any kind of money or anything like that. And it's actually what is kind of motivating me more now is like the business. It's kind of generating like a different kind of passion for it than I. When I originally kind of said, okay, I'm going to try to see with this project, like how much money I can make with this. My original thought was, all right, stay at 1,000 cards, kind of just, as one goes out, one comes in, and try to keep it to one box, because I agree with you, like the inventory thing, like you look at all these people that try to get out of it, like they're selling boxes and they've got stuff stacked everywhere, and I don't want to be that guy. But I actually found myself with freaking 3-4 row boxes that are packed to the rim now, and when you go through that purge, and obviously you got, some going off to CompC and some going off to DC Sports now, and some that you're just trying to liquidate in some type of way. How do you get past the barrier of like money that you put in? I know that you'd rather have that money, like you said, but how do you go about just kind of saying, okay, I'm going to sort this, get rid of it, any way I can? What's the process that you go through and the other part of that is like, I can't imagine these people that have 10 5-row boxes of cards that, like I'm looking at 4 and I'm like, man, I don't like, that's a whole day or 3 days. I don't know how long that's going to take, but is it something where you just sat down and said, all right, I'm going to go through this today and I'm just going to purge basically.
Yeah, I think you just have to commit to it and be real with yourself. I think that's also, just ripping the Band-Aid and swallowing the loss. And, it definitely hurts when you're going through where like, oh man, I thought this would pan out, or I thought, buying this in quantity was a great play, or, whatever the case may be. But for me, there's kind of a couple factors. One, how long have I had it? And, hey, it's only dropped in price. It's just time to move on from it. Or two, it's like where are we in kind of the sports cycle? Is there potential for hype? Is it kind of, are there new sets out that are more desirable? So kind of evaluating those two things together. And then I think what ultimately, I guess, makes it feel rewarding is, like I said previously, where it's like, I like running sale. I used to do eBay sales, so I'd run, 35% off all my inventory, and, you get a pretty decent spike, however it works with the algorithm or, what have you there. If I'm running a sale on ComC and I'm like, I'm going to do 40% off, let's just see whatever sells. And, when you start to see some of those scraps that are selling where you're like, man, like, I would rather sell these cards at 60 cents a piece to, get me $15 and I'll put it into a Garrett Nussmeier Purple Shimmer, right? So it always feels more satisfying and I think of it like if I'm at a card show, if I'm set up and someone was like, hey, I'll take all these for $30. I'm like, yes, I would absolutely, in a heartbeat, I would, trade this for $30 so that I can go buy this across the table. So it's always just, for me, it's easier to rip that Band-Aid off when you realize you can put that money into better things, and it's just way more refreshing where, hey, I'd rather, and I do this when I buy as well, where it's like, hey, what parallel to buy, right? And there's all these different price inconsistencies. Base auto's at $10, Fractor auto 15, yellow's at 25. And when I'm looking at kind of the bigger purchases where I'm like, I feel like the high end's too high, like to put it in perspective, I'd rather have 10 base autos than this one auto and just go the quantity value play, just always looking at those types of prices. I think it's just being real with yourself. And I think ComC helps as well because you can see what the lowest priced item is. I'm like, all right, that's, sometimes I think with eBay, you can be like, I think $3.99 is a fair price, but you're not able to check, and there's some at $1.99, and it's going to be hard for you to move. ComC, which is the interface that allows you to price it at the lowest available, and hopefully you can start moving things from there. And once you see that money start to come in, you're like, all right, now I'm going to go buy this next hot prospect. So it's just a matter of being real and turning it into something else that you'd rather have your money in and just be done with it.
I think that's such a great way to look at it. It's where this money's going to go, or at least always having a goal of where that money's going to go. I think that's actually really insightful because, you go through these stages and you learn, you don't know what you don't know, but then once you know it, you're like, okay, well, first Bowman isn't anything. I should be getting maybe color or numbered or get into the autos or whatever it may be. And if you can put that money into something that's better, that should motivate you. I can see how that works for sure. With the hobby in general, like what are some trends that you're seeing that you think, that you like? What are some that you don't like right now?
I guess for me personally, I like the attention that's coming to college football, and that's certainly helped. It's definitely refreshing to see when people are chasing those big names, and they're at least interested. Come draft time or preseason time. With your Shadur and Travis Hunters, as NIL grows, I'm sure it's just internally a monster to deal with. But as a card collector and someone who enjoys that side of the hobby, I do enjoy just kind of, I like seeing Diego Pavia go on a podcast, and now they're dropping the SEC documentary on Netflix. Like, I think that's going to be great for people to gain more interest, especially before the season. Like, whoa, I actually buy into this DJ Lagway hype. I want to buy a little something and, hold it for the season. So I like the attention that college football is getting. And I also like how Bowman University and all these other products are relatively affordable compared to your NFL Prism or any other professional or licensed sets from the four major leagues. I guess baseball is always pretty relatively affordable, but it always just blows my mind how a box of like NFL certified is like $600, and I'm like, and you're getting like two autos and you're probably not in great shape on a lot of those. But a box of Bowman University, you can get them at 150, at release, and it's enjoyable. You're not losing everything, and it's a good price point where a lot of people can get in, and a lot of people, who are chasing the big names are like, hey, that I'm only looking for Garrett Nussmeier and all the big names here. And then they're like, Gaby, if you want the rest, like I'll sell them to you at a very solid premium. I just want more money to go get more boxes. So and that's something that I've also liked. And then hopefully with Bowman University, it does come out before like right around week 1, 2, 3 is what they've said. So that's also a big positive to hopefully get that early in the season. Last year we got it the week of Thanksgiving. Kids are hitting the portal basically a week later, so kind of a tough part of the season to release. And then I also like just how many companies are getting into the game with Leaf's going after high school prospects now, which I love. I'll prospect as early as possible. I like learning about players, watching film, and just being like, hey, this guy that just signed with Southern Miss, I really like watching this guy's. Leaf, Pulse, and a bunch of others. Onyx has done a great job on it as well. So I like how there's a lot of different players in the game. A lot of kids are getting autos themselves now, so you can look at a top 100 list, and there's probably 60%, 70% that have trading cards now, which is awesome. So I like the direction that things are going there.
Yeah, I think that's another area that you've gone left when everybody else has gone right. With with the general the general consensus is stay away from unlicensed, stay away from those types of things. But Leaf and Onyx and those companies, they're producing great cards, but they're getting in on players sooner because of that kind of opportunity, and that creates these kind of natural buying and selling markers. Until that Bowman U Chrome auto comes out, there's that Leaf auto has value,
Yeah.
and still does even after the fact. But but there's an opportunity there. Your dad, your husband, you work a full-time job, right? Like obviously you get home at night. I think you work from home maybe even as well. But like budgeting your time and sourcing, like what are some of the strategies that what are some of the things that, whether it's saved searches or I know you use tools like watch count, things like that. Like talk a little bit about like how to create some efficiencies to source effectively.
Yeah. So I was actually thinking about this earlier. That I got a question. It's like, how do you find, these good deals, or, how do you always find these things? And I think, like you said, save searches on eBay, really anything. And I'll always add, I've got like my core, like PC stuff. I'm like, all right, like if this pops up, I'm looking for it. But like just the other day, I added a bunch of Leaf autos to kind of a save search, and utilizing like the functions within using parentheses and quotes and stuff within your search helped tremendously, because you can just I have Leaf and then all their last names, Rayner, Gardner, all these guys, where I'm like, hey, I just want to watch to see, and it'll pull it up all in one search, which is nice. So I can scroll. I'm not having to click through 6 different names each time one pops up. So save searches for sure help, where it's like, hey, this is the guy that I'm looking for, and anytime it comes up, I'm not constantly hounding it and refreshing it to find some snipes, but it certainly helps kind of just eliminate the fact that you might just be spitballing names every time you're on eBay. So it just kind of consolidates everything there. And same with ComC on the app, you can have saved searches. So really the only thing that I'm checking is Bowman University football, and I see every card that gets uploaded to the platform on Bowman University, and I've got some for Leaf and other sets as well. But narrowing that focus for me certainly helps, so I can at least see. And then it's just really a matter of when I'm scrolling on Twitter or any other social media, and it's like I said, when I see someone is getting hype, or some sort of top 10 list, I'm like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna go check out their cards. And from there, again, it's kind of that arbitrage of like, Nick Anderson's getting a lot of hype. His autos are like $6 on ComC right now, and gonna be an LSU. There's a lot of SEC or just Power 5 starting wide receivers, running backs, where like I don't think their autos should be under $10. So it's just kind of, you can go down rabbit holes of all these different pieces of information, and that kind of leads me to what I'm searching for. I guess it's not totally, structured in that sense, but yeah, just utilizing those and making sure that you've got everything that you're already looking for is covered. But really, in terms of my home life and such, really from, by the time my son goes to bed, 8 o'clock to I'd say 11:30, I'm just all cards. I'm editing videos, I'm searching for stuff, I'm active in Discord a lot more, so I'm just always searching, thinking of things, putting together my Trello board for the next day and how I want to attack that, and just other content ideas that I see. So I'm really try to just that's my time. My wife is a early bed goer, so it works out where it's like, all right, like that is my time to grind for cards, and then usually, try to get something in the morning as well before I start my full-time job, where I'm like, all right, I can start packing eBay orders and, getting everything sorted, getting a video planned for today, getting some footage early on in the day. So really just a matter of having that time block to myself, and working from home does certainly help when you're alone in the morning and can knock out a bunch of stuff, and then everyone's asleep at night, where I'm like, I can grind this thing out and get everything I need to get done.
Yeah, it's huge, man. Well, I know that's a challenge for a lot of people, is just kind of figuring out, where to do those things. But I think the things that you do, again, those save searches, the watch count, all those types of things, like it makes that time really efficient. It's something that I've learned from you and continue to try to get better at as well. Man, I could talk forever. I want to end the show with just some quick questions here. So just real quick, PC card you'll.
Okay, that is my Ken Griffey Seattle Children's Hospital auto. It was a 2021 Children's Hospital fundraiser set out of Seattle. My wife's from Seattle, and I had a good buddy who was chasing this auto, and I had brought it up to my in-laws, and they came back with 2 boxes on Christmas morning and ripped that thing open. And that was like, again, I was pretty small budget there. Like it's a $500 card. Like I had never even held a card that expensive, and so to me, like just ripping it in their house on Christmas morning, and like just it's also a sick signature from Ken Griffey. So just that card I will never ever sell for sure.
I actually looked that set up after you posted about that at one point, because I'm being coaching in Seattle and just having that connection too. I thought that was really cool. Favorite content creator? Hobby content creator?
Yeah, so I would say Card Collector 2 is probably just my favorite. Just feel like you get the good variety of stuff, especially now with the podcasts. You get card show stuff, just kind of general vlogs and such, product rips, things like that. I've always felt like if there were like a hobby president, I feel like Card Collector 2 was just kind of the most well-liked across the board, and so definitely the one that always pops up on my recommended.
Yeah, he does. I mean, what a great job he's doing for sure, especially with the latest podcast. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
Favorite card show experience?
I guess Shipshawana. So that was, I'd been talking with Ryan, and I don't know how things kind of got to where they were, but he's like, I'd love to have you at Shipshawana. So flew out in the middle of nowhere. I took a flight to South Bend, an hour drive into Shipshawana. And that was awesome. Just, I'd never been to really the Midwest outside of work, where like I've just actually like been around, so that was cool. And then just all the people, again, with kind of the networking that I've built over the last few years, like there were dealers there and people that I met, and I've always said I won't remember what cards I bought and sold there, but I'll always remember like the people that I met and hung out with and spent time with. And it's like, hey, now I know, Mikey B and Hollister's cards and Cam's cards on all just a way different level, right? So that was definitely, no one in particular moment, I would say. It was just the overall experience, being in an entirely different region of the country as well, seeing, just I'm so locked into kind of the Arizona sports market and everything that I know here, where it's like the Midwest was also cool because you're seeing, Michigan, Indiana, and all these Green Bay, all these, different teams, varieties. So that was really cool to see as well.
I mean, again, you put out a lot of videos around that as well. I thought it was an awesome experience. It's definitely on my list to go to as well. What's a dream card? What's a dream Grail card?
Ooh, that's a good question. Right now, I've been on a huge vintage kick right now, and I don't know if there's any one that that would be the smart choice to get, like of course, like a 52 Mantle or a Jim Brown of sorts. But honestly, actually, I'd go a little bit different, which is odd because I am not a like case hit kaboom downtown guy, but I would really love a Pat Tillman downtown. Just everything, being in Arizona and just growing up with that and being close around the situation and such, and a Cardinal fan early on. I think that's just one of the coolest pieces of art and probably meaning in the hobby.
Couldn't agree with more than that. I couldn't. That's a great one right there. What about obviously we'll talk. I want to make sure you mentioned your Discord as well as Patreon group and those types of things. But something that you haven't maybe mentioned on a video or a Patreon or something. Give me a card recommendation right now.
Ooh, let's see. Gosh, right? Okay, so I mean, it's a little interesting, I guess, because they had a lot of hype last year, and I briefly mentioned the team, but I'm kind of in on Nebraska right now. I've been buying a lot of Dane Key Bowman first. Again, going back to kind of my Nick Anderson, like Dane Key Bowman first autos were like under $8. I think he'll be he's been super productive at Kentucky. They say the new offensive coordinator out there is supposed to get things rolling. I like the beginning of Nebraska's schedule, so I did even look at Dylan Raiola, which a year ago I was not even interested in, but I love what Nebraska potentially has and the schedule start, and Dane Key has been a guy that I was buying quite a bit of as of last 2 weeks.
It's good to hear because I picked up. This is a while ago now, but you don't actually go to too many. It doesn't sound like you go to too many card shops, and I have a hard time at card shops a lot of times just because obviously they got to make their money, and you want to support that and all that. So the pricing of it, but I went to a local card shop down here that moved to a new area and trying to find a spot that it's just a good spot to go, right? Every once in a while. And I actually bought a couple Dane Key autos for like $6-7 at the time that were overpriced for their comp, I guess you should say. But I think it is important to support those people, but it's good to hear that those are probably going to go up. So I'm happy about that. All right. Yeah. I mentioned the Discord. I mentioned the Patreon, the YouTube channel, like just where do you recommend people kind of staying up with you and all the things that you got going on, kind of a central hub, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I would say Discord is a great way to search Gabe Card Stacks Discord. It's a great way to, I guess, have direct access to me and just kind of have that communication line. And if you want that interaction, I'm available there. We've got tons of channels for whatever you like, whatever you enjoy, and tons of people who are supportive and always, bouncing ideas off one another. So that's grown over 1,200 members, which is crazy to think about, but a good community out there. Just recently launched the Patreon. For $5 a month, I give you basically my brain dump of everything that I'm thinking of. A lot of the top 10 Bowman autos under $10, things like that. Once the Bowman U checklist comes out, it'll be a huge deep dive of everything that goes into there. I just broke down the score and NIL checklist yesterday, actually. That's just a huge brain dump for $5. Do a video every single week. That I think has been pretty enjoyable, and I think people are enjoying that content. And then just YouTube, TikTok, everything Gabe Card Stacks been grinding out content.
Yeah, you're killing it, man. And like I told you, each time we talk, I'm just so impressed by you and just, again, authentic, genuine, and there to help people. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me is just, you've been a huge resource for me getting back in it at this level. And just appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on the show and spending some time with us. And thanks for all you do.
Yeah, of course. No, thanks for having me. This was great. Anytime.